Howdy y'all, and in this video I just want to make this short and sweet. So obviously those who know me know that like many years ago, was it 6 years ago? I don't even know how long it is. I don't really care how long it is, but you know, I was on Twitter a long time ago and I was wildin', you know, I was saying some shit. I was saying this and that, and many things I said were wrong. Actually, arguably the entirety of it was wrong. So everything I said there, let's just say it's non-canonical, and I never really believed in it. Really, after saying I never even really believed in it. But there was one thing that I did believe in, and of course, you know, this was when I was known as Visionary Oaks, and you know, I did make that video on Lysander Spooner. It was actually one of my better videos. It's very well done, and I wasn't wrong. You know, like here's the view. Like I wasn't wrong to say Lysander Spooner was correct in terms of like his analysis of why slavery was abolished, right? Obviously, slavery, chattel slavery, was unprofitable to the slave owners, and it was a hassle owning people, and yada, yada, yada. But to actually claim that chattel slavery is a lesser evil to wage labor, like, oh, it's, you know, chattel slavery, I was always like, chattel slavery is bad, but obviously it's not as bad as wage labor. This claim I made for years, right? And up until very recently, I didn't change it. This view is wrong. It is 100% wrong. No cop out. No, this or that. No excuses. I was wrong to promote this view that, you know, the lesser evil was chattel slavery. Like, you know, I mean, being a chattel slave is a lot worse than being a wage laborer. It's a lot worse. The direct ownership of a human being and then forcing that person to work and forcing them to work for, you know, for another person on a limited space of land, whether it's a plantation or a house or just anything, like any kind of area, right? That is far, far worse than a 9-to-5 job where you're not I mean, yes, you are to an extent tied to the location. You have to drive to the location. You have to be there. You have to, but you don't live there, right? You don't live there, and you can still quit that job, right? And then you can move to another place, and you can move city, you can move country, you can do this or that, right? But yeah, so look, the view I was espousing was wrong, right? Obviously, though, wage labor is extremely immoral, and it's not like they're so far apart as some people have you, like they're literally a billion miles apart. They're whole different galaxies. Some forms of wage labor can be worse than chattel slavery, right? In terms of where it's happening on the globe and in what part of history. Obviously, like Bangladeshi sweatshop workers probably have it a bit worse than, say, African-American chattel slaves at the time. Chattel slaves probably had a higher standard of living. But regardless, the distinction between wage labor and chattel slavery, it's always going to be, whenever making the distinction, from an inherent essentialist perspective, right? It's always going to be worse as chattel slavery. Because imagine those Bangladeshi sweatshop workers who went to work. Imagine they were forced to live in the sweatshop. They were forced to live in the facility, on the grounds, in the general area, and they cannot leave, and they cannot quit their job, and they cannot do anything else, and then there's zero possibility of them being self-employed, and they're literally owned, like, personally and directly, and they're forced to interact with other people and live in the same area, and they can't invest. There's no access to the S&P 500. There's no investing. There's no compound interest. There's no gaining money on your savings. There's nothing. You can't build wealth, and this also is a big explainer as to why African Americans today have less money than, say, white people, because of slavery, and as well as segregation and redlining, and the fact that black people were so often excluded from businesses and from investment programs and the ability to invest. But basically, it's the fact that black families could not save money or buy property, and therefore, as a result, there was virtually no inheritance. Even today, there's virtually no inheritance in African American communities in black majority cities or amongst individual black people. Wealth passed down from one generation to the other because of all these factors. Because white people had the monumental head start. It was completely racist. Well, obviously, it goes without saying. It was completely unfair, and it's absolutely an explanation for what we see today in terms of the economic and unfair and discriminatory disparities, right? They were the result of racist discrimination. But here's the thing. None of this matters, all these reasons, right? I mean, I'm just giving them because why not, right? Since I'm here. it doesn't matter. Even if it were the exact reverse, right? Like literally the reverse, I would still believe in the position that I'm holding now, that chattel slavery, by the inherent nature of it being chattel slavery, owning another person, is inherently always worse than wage labor, inherently more immoral, inherently always evil. Chattel slavery is always evil, no matter the circumstance. In fact, so much so that any person in bondage who's held like involuntarily and they can't leave their job and they're a chattel slave, they need to be freed immediately, regardless of whether the government considers it legal or not. I don't care. You need to free them, even on an individual level, both on an individual level and a collective level. And why do I believe this? Why do I believe this now? Because chattel slavery is haram. It's explicitly stated to be haram. And the Prophet Musa, peace and Allah's blessings be upon him, freed the slaves. It didn't matter that the government that existed in Egypt at the time had it so that it was legal, it was like state enforced slavery. It didn't matter. Yes, you should follow the law of the country within reason, but this is an example where it's outside of reason, because it's a sin, because it's immoral, because it is literally, inherently, a haram act. No other opinion is relevant. Because the Quran says it, it is. And there is no arguing with that. That's called maturity, realizing that truth exists beyond you and beyond what you used to think. And you need to adopt your beliefs to truth. Truth doesn't adopt to your beliefs, believe it or not, as shocking as it might be to some people who act like that's how it works. And that's all I need to say. And Allah knows best.